did something weird on my end. You can see it now though?
I see it.
Cool.
Okay, cool. Now we're live on YouTube. I'll go ahead and let everyone in.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll get started in just a minute or two. Appreciate everybody being here on time. So just thanks again, everybody, for getting on. I think we'll start at 10:03. How about that? Just to give everybody another official minute or two. And we are, I think you all got a little notice, but we are on YouTube. So if anybody needs to know, we are streaming again. Okay, Soupy, can you go ahead and switch to the next slide so we can put the agenda up for everybody? All right, so good morning. Thanks everybody for being here. I know there's a lot going on in South Louisiana right now, and so I appreciate everybody taking the time out to kind of check back in with this process. You can, if you need to leave and do hurricane things, you can, find this on YouTube after the fact, and I'll obviously reach out to us and we can be in touch with you as well. So today is really our kickoff meeting for the second round of the consequence analysis. Today we have all of the advisory groups participating on the call because the meeting is less about your specific expertise and more about providing everybody with a common understanding of this phase of the planning process and what's going to happen. So according to the agenda here, we're going to go over three basic things. We're going to talk about how the planning team used your input from the first round of the consequence analysis. Lindsay is going to walk you all through the broad outlines of the draft portfolio, action portfolio, which is the document we are asking you to provide feedback on. And then finally, Soupy from the Water Institute will go into the details of the analysis itself, the forms, how to fill it out, how to make it, the easiest for you to fill out, but also the most helpful for us to kind of get feedback. As with all of our meetings, these are being made available to the public on our YouTube page. But today we're not holding a formal public comment period. So we're just encouraging everybody right now to kind of focus their energies and attention on the two documents that are out instead of this kind of process part of it today. We actually, just while we're talking about it, we haven't been able to post online the documents yet, but we have been emailing them out to everybody interested. So I know you all have them. Please share it. If anybody you know is interested in it, we are also emailing them out, and people will send us requests at climate@la.gov, and we're going to hopefully have those up online very soon. And just lastly, in terms of announcements, everything that we're putting out, we have put out in this process. So the public comment will be open through September 27th. And the advisory groups, we're hoping to get all your feedback back by September 15th. So those are kind of our deadlines and what we're going to do today. So with that, I think we'll jump right in. Thanks, Soupy. Yeah, so again, we are starting our second round of consequence analysis today, step 4 in our structured decision-making process that we've been following all along. This step, obviously, I don't have to tell you, is the biggest lift for the advisory groups. And so I want to just thank you all again for sticking with us and being willing to provide us with your feedback and your insights. This has been incredibly helpful so far. Today, I'm going to just really kind of start off by providing you with a reminder of how this analysis is structured and how the second round that we're going to do starting today is going to be a little bit different from the first one that we did back in May. So you can go to the next one. So as you know, we have 2 main tools to help us forecast the consequences of the actions that we're proposing in this climate plan. One is the Energy Policy Simulator modeling tool, which provides estimates of greenhouse gas emissions reductions from different policy approaches. It's the one that helps us see how effective the actions that we're proposing are at actually getting us to our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. It's the one that makes these colorful graphs that you see in the upper right-hand corner of this slide that we presented to the task force in June. The update on this tool itself is that it's being updated right now with information from the newest Louisiana greenhouse gas inventory that is nearly final. And so we're able to port all that information into that tool, and we're excited to be able to offer that online in the coming weeks for anybody to use, to kind of play with, to kind of see how it works and to see what they can do with that. So that's coming soon. And then the second big tool is the survey that you all fill out for us. This is where we gather input on the consequences for all of the fundamental objectives, including those social, economic, environmental, resilience, and other fundamental objectives that the task force has identified. At the end of this meeting, like I said earlier, Soupy will walk us all through the survey itself and that we sent out for this round of analysis, and we'll kind of get into how to fill that out. We can go to the next one. Thank you. So here again, these are our fundamental objectives. This is what we're evaluating the portfolio against. In the first round, and again in this second round, the portfolios are being evaluated against all 18 of these fundamental objectives. These are the ones that we were identified with the collective input from the sector committees, advisory groups, and the task force very early in this process. And it obviously includes all the big categories that you have on the left there. Here it comes. So we've got greenhouse gas emissions, but we've also got, like I said, quality of life, equity, economy, environment, resilience, and short and long-term success. All important objectives that are kind of on our list. So now we can go to the next one, I think, Soupy. So let's recap the first round of consequence analysis so you guys can appreciate how we kind of used your feedback the first time. The first round, as you remember, we gave you 5 extreme hypothetical portfolios that contained strategies only. So it was at a much higher level, and we asked you to evaluate them against those 18 fundamental objectives. Each of the hypothetical portfolios represented a theoretical future scenario of what it would look like if we turned up the dial all the way up on just one specific approach or set of strategies in a climate plan. So such as intensive electrification through zero carbon renewable energy, that was one of them. So we had 5 different ones that just really honed in on one thing. And again, they were only at the high level strategies. They didn't have specific actions. And our main goal in the first round that we were hoping to get from you guys was to kind of better understand the magnitude of the challenge, the maximum benefits or the limitations of a particular one-sided approach that we put forward in these portfolios. And then we also wanted to see the various impacts on the people, environment, and economy of Louisiana. So that analysis, that first round really helped us shape the high level priorities and set this and set of strategies and actions that Lindsay is going to present to you in a few minutes in the middle part of this presentation. We can go to the next one, I think. So your feedback was collected from the first round and used to help us see which approaches had the most potential and which ones contained concerning elements. And so this is the chart that we showed to the task force in June. And this is kind of just a zoom out from all the feedback that you gave us. And it clearly shows, obviously the inaction portfolio produced overall negative comments. 3 others were primarily positive, and then the CCUS one was mostly neutral with a few negatives and a few positive elements mixed in as well. Some of the specific feedback that we heard was that positive equity outcomes require targeted and deliberate effort, and that communities need to have a leadership role in design and implementation. We heard that considering that it was important to consider strategy interactions in the context for implementations, so whether it was regional, global trends, cost of implementation, these are all important factors. We heard that outreach and engagement were really key, that scale was an important consideration, and that there was a real need to identify uncertainties and additional research needs. So if you want to kind of see the deep dive into kind of how we synthesized all this and presented it to the task force, I encourage you to go back and look at the June task force meeting. That's where that really was discussed at length. So we can go to the next one, Supi. So we did have some big takeaways from the June meeting. So after we reviewed the modeling results and the advisory group feedback, we presented these kind of big takeaways to the task force as well that helped us put together the document that you have in front of you today that we're asking you to kind of think about. So the big takeaways were: we must take action. No single strategy was the solution. We need many strategies from the various portfolios that we shared are going to be needed to achieve our emissions reductions targets. And the strategies are going to require intentional action to ensure that we reap the co-benefits and positive outcomes that we're hoping for. We also, another big takeaway was that further analysis on much of this is going to be needed to reduce uncertainty and promote confidence associated with these outcomes. So that's kind of where we kind of brought it. And so then I want to show you in the next slide, just kind of what we've been doing since that June meeting to kind of get to where we are today. So since that first round of analysis in the presentation in June, we've taken everything that's come in and created the draft portfolio that we're asking you and the public to provide feedback on. The draft is a synthesis of everything we've received and discussed and reviewed to date. So it includes the public call to action, for action ideas, the sector committee work where they submitted actions, meeting notes, discussions, the advisory group consequence analysis, all the discussions that were held at the task force level, alongside best practices from other states and direction from the governor. So we've kind of taken all that together. And so what I would say, importantly, the portfolio that you have in front of you and that we've put out is very much a draft. This one's not meant to be hypothetical as the other ones. This is more like the first draft of an essay. So it is our best attempt at completing the assignment, but we know it's going to improve and change as we get your feedback. So this one is a different beast than the one from the last analysis. So Supi, we could go to the next slide, I think. And so for an overview of the second round of the consequence analysis, I want to make it just really clear. We only have this one portfolio. And if you've looked at it yet, you know that it also includes not just strategies, but also the details of specific actions. And I think that's a really big difference. So in this round, to kind of just sum it up quickly, we have one portfolio and not 5. That we have much more detail being provided to you than the first time. The portfolio is a draft. I think that's really important, but it is not hypothetical in the sense that the other ones were. So this is really our first stab at compiling a comprehensive climate plan that has a lot of room for improvement. I would just say that too. And so that last piece is just really, I just want to just emphasize that your feedback is really more important than ever. And we really just appreciate thoughts that you are able to put together on these. So I think I'm almost done. So what are our goals of the second consequence analysis? They are to help the task force understand the impacts of the draft portfolio as a whole. So we do want that big picture zoomed out consideration. It's also to help the task force refine and improve the overall portfolio of strategies and actions in the plan. So anywhere where you can kind of dig in deeper and give us more information is really helpful. We will use this. One of the goals is to inform the details of implementation. Again, how do we best maximize co-benefits across our fundamental objectives, and to really help us understand where we need additional focus in the years to come. So these are all the big goals of this effort. So once again, we're going to be asking you to complete a survey to do this evaluation as a structured way to provide this feedback. This time, you are going to look at the entire draft action portfolio as a whole, but we're also going to have a way for you to kind of select specific strategies or actions to give us more detailed feedback on the fundamental objectives. And you'll also be able to point us towards additional resources if something jumps out at you. And next one, Soupy. Thank you. So finally, what are we going to do with your input? We are going to compile, synthesize, and present to the task force to inform our discussions on portfolio refinement. The planning team, which is kind of the governor's office and the Water Institute, are going to provide the task force with graphs, again, that synthesize the predicted outcomes as kind of a quick reference guide, along with highlights from comments that you all submit to us on this portfolio. We're going to have your input on individual strategies and actions will also be highlighted and used to kind of make changes through the portfolio. And as well, so will the additional resources you point us towards. We'll use those and inform the plan implementation or modify the portfolio with that stuff. And so our plan is to get all of this done and turned around and back in front of the task force by October 4th at our meeting. And so with that, before I hand it over to Lindsay, I just wanted to see if there are any questions on kind of this, why we're doing this or what we're doing or how it's different from the first time. It's pretty similar, so it shouldn't be too bad, but I would be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. Okay, well, we'll have more time throughout and to kind of get to questions too. So Lindsay, why don't you take it from there and we'll keep moving.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Charles, for that overview. So now I'm going to switch us to talking about the draft portfolio, walking through what you guys will be advising us on in the second analysis. So as Charles mentioned, this looks very different than in the first round where we had these hypothetical scenarios only of high-level strategies. We tried to provide you guys with a lot more detail for this round of analysis, understanding that last time it was pretty challenging to provide input at such a high level. So before we jump in, I'll just bring us back to this diagram that we're all really familiar with by now, but knowing that you guys haven't met since March or April, I just wanted to bring you guys back through our process. So is it notes on the top part of this flow chart? We reported out to the task force in June, as Charles walked through, and we used a lot of your input in our whole staff process in refining and reorganizing, grouping our strategies, and bringing us to this place where we can create a draft portfolio in the summertime. We talked through that at a very high level with the task force in July, but here we are today at the plus minus sign on the bottom row, where we're evaluating this draft portfolio against our objectives. But understanding that this is an iterative process, we need a lot of rounds of review and perspectives here. We'll have the opportunity to come back in October. As we mentioned, we'll talk with the task force at the beginning of October, a pretty similar meeting that we had as the one in June, where we walked the task force through the potential emission reduction of different strategies and different sections of the plan, alongside the input that you guys give on the qualitative objectives. And then we have an all hands meeting planned for the end of October, where we'll focus all of you guys, the sector committees, the task force, on talking through implementation steps and using the feedback that the advisory groups provide as a guide in doing so. And then as the last two steps mentioned, We will discuss trade-offs and make the recommendations as we move later into the fall and winter. But going through those steps in the review process so that we're understanding all the implications of action and that we're considering a lot of different perspectives as we've done throughout this work, understanding that it will keep evolving. Subi, if you can go to the next slide. These are the 9 sections that we laid out in the draft portfolio. I'll just take a few minutes to walk through each section at a very high level, but feel free to have your portfolio handy if you want to look through it in more detail. And again, I'll just provide the overview today. You guys have 3 or 4 weeks to think through and provide your critical feedback. Today's just really about understanding what we've put in front of you, the different materials that we've given. So these 9 different sections range from energy transition, industrial decarbonization, infrastructure, methane emissions, low carbon economy, transportation, natural working lands, and then on a few sections on the implementation side as well. So moving to the next slide, starting with clean energy transition. So clean energy transition is really including how we shift our energy from resources that rely on a lot of greenhouse gases to those that rely on little to no greenhouse gases, such as wind, solar, hydropower, those types of less emitting GHG energy resources. So this is central in our climate plan from 2 different perspectives as we see it. So first from the utility perspective, which is encompassed in this first strategy on shifting the power grid. And then in the second strategy on end users, how do we increase electricity generation and access for all users? So with those 2 perspectives in mind, that's how we frame the 2 major strategies here and the 12 actions underneath. And just noting that this section doesn't address the infrastructure that's needed to make the transition or even the economies of how we do this, but those will be brought in to later sections. This one's just focusing on these 2 major components. Moving to the next slide, onto industrial decarbonization. This is a pretty big section of the portfolio with 4 big strategies and 16 actions, mainly because industry accounts for a large portion of our emission profile. And it's important that we develop concrete strategies and actions that partner with our industries, with our agencies, and our communities in this transition. So we approach this through a few different ways. This first strategy is focused on how we monitor and track decarbonization, and then also on how we certify and support industry through the transition. The fourth strategy is all about efficiency and modernization of our processes and our facilities, a real foundational principle in decarbonizing the sector. And then strategy 5 is on the newer technologies and fuel switching. So electrification, low and no carbon fuels, low or no carbon feedstocks, CCUS. And then as we get into the 6th strategy, also wanted to bring some attention to reducing the carbon intensity of our materials. That looks like 5 clean circular economy principles. And the actions here are pretty detailed, that we tried to walk through some definitions of these different terms, understanding that everyone is likely not an expert in these different sectors. So try to provide some context around each of the strategies that we pursued. And just noting here that that section's not addressing the up and midstream operations, so like transportation and exploration of oil and gas, as much as the facilities and products themselves. That kind of needs a different approach, so we'll come back to that in a few sections. Moving on to the next one. Next, we've set aside a separate section to address infrastructure. So this is central in clean energy and in industrial decarbonization, that we're intentional with our infrastructure in this transition. So this section is aimed at the how component of the transition. We want to ensure that our new infrastructure is resilient, reliable, equitable, and sustainable from all sides. So in planning, siting, permitting, and in implementation. So with that in mind, we have 2 major strategies here. The first is focused on reliability and resilience, with kind of a focus around planning there. And the second one is focused on equity, efficiency, and sustainability, bringing that focus to siting and permitting. And there are a lot of different actions under this section that offer ways that we can attain these pretty lofty strategies. Moving to the next one. As I mentioned earlier in industrial decarbonization, actively managing methane emissions. We pull this out because the way that we need to address our emissions from oil and gas infrastructure is a little bit different than our industrial facilities. So we understand that methane emissions come from many other sectors, but pulling it out here because there's some unique ways that we can mitigate methane through oil and gas. So the first strategy is focused on how do we increase resources for decommissioning legacy oil and gas infrastructure. The second one is focused on monitoring and regulating, understanding that we need to know better where leaks occur and the status of our legacy infrastructure so that we can increase the right resources for decommissioning them. Moving to the next slide. Another big section of our plan is around transportation development in the built environment. We have 5 strategies here and 23 actions. So it's a big section seeking to address a variety of areas around these 3 different priorities of transportation, how we develop in the built environment. It's bringing together work of a few of our different committees. So the work of our transportation committee, the land use, and partially on the natural on the ag and forestry conservation side as well. So trying to tie a lot of those coordinated visions together in this strategy. So we're looking at everything from passenger vehicles, medium and heavy duty vehicles, to freight and land use planning and efficiency and weatherization of homes. But breaking this down a little bit by strategies, this first strategy is reducing the vehicle miles traveled and just having more efficiencies in our transportation. The second one is on increasing the accessibility of clean fuels and clean vehicles. Then we brought focus to public transit on an urban, rural, and regional scale. Strategy 14 is around coordinating land use. It's bringing together a lot of discussions we had in the transportation, the agriculture and conservation committee, and the land use committee. And then that strategy 15 is on efficiency and resilience of homes. So bring a lot of these big ideas under one section in the plan. Moving on to natural and working lands. So our initial draft of this section had been divided into our natural lands and then our working lands. We wanted to pull out wetlands from both of these. So now we have 3 different strategies, 12 actions in this section that span the urban and rural landscapes and the agriculture and forestry lands. So you can see across these 3 strategies, we have a consistent goal of maximizing our climate mitigation and adaptation goals while we're also trying to increase sequestration potential for these lands, the natural and working lands. And that's just showing and trying to tie that connection between our resilience and our flood risk reduction alongside how we're protecting lands for their sequestration potential. So again, we break that out. The first strategy is around our natural lands and our urban green spaces. The second one is around wetlands. And then the last one is around the conservation of our working ag and forestry lands. Moving on to the next slide, we have 2 strategies and 9 actions under this section on an inclusive low carbon economy. So this is another section that addresses the how of the energy transition, kind of like the infrastructure section. Spans across a lot of different sectors. But this one's focused on the economy. How do we ensure that Louisiana workers are centered in the energy transition and that we have the right resources to retrain, to educate, and to transition all the way from our K through 12 teaching to our universities, to our retraining and workforce development programs that are easily accessible for everyone. So we take a few different approaches here. The first one in strategy 19, more on the educational side and the research side. Strategy 20 is on creating those workforce training opportunities. And then strategy 21 is at the state level. How do we create hub almost of economic resilience. And then moving on to these last two sections, this section on collaboration and partnerships looks a little different than the rest of our sections of this plan. This one outlines the key partners that are needed in ensuring that we implement this plan successfully. So we lay out different partnerships with federal funding and the federal government opportunities, the national and regional dialogues and planning that we should be engaged in. Strategy 24 is alignment across state government, local government, the private sector, and engaging with communities, disadvantaged communities, and Indigenous peoples in particular. So ensuring that we're creating these call to actions for each of our stakeholders, but we don't have any specific actions laid out in this section because we do need alignment across all the different actions that have been mentioned in the other sections. Then on to our last section that talks through accountability and adaptability to ensure lasting success. So there are two different strategies in this section. We want to take two different points of focus here. So one is on implementation of the climate action plan, and then the other is on progress in reducing emissions. So the strategy 28 is focusing on ensuring lasting success of the action plan. And we offer up here through legislatively enabling the task force and establishing a governor's office of climate resilience, a way to centralize the work that needs to be done through this plan. And then that last strategy outlines a few actions to track progress on monitoring greenhouse gases, updates to the inventory, and updates to the climate action plan. So just ensuring that we're staying up to date and we're maintaining that flexibility moving forward. So those are all the sections of the plan. I'll pause right there if anyone has questions on the layout of the portfolio as it stands right now. And just to note, I'd circulated two documents to everyone earlier this week. The other document is the revised background information of our action plan. So the portfolio is the one that we'll be evaluating. The other one is just the background context information that we revised since earlier in the year. But any questions on the portfolio? We'll have time later to come back to this. Okay, Supi, we can keep going. I'll just tee up this survey before handing it over to Supi. Just want to walk through a few changes from the last survey that you guys did in April. So in the first round, each advisory group was sent a different group of our fundamental objectives so that we could get targeted input based on where we saw the advisory group had the most suited expertise as a group. And we discussed that with a lot of you back in March. But in this round, since you all have the hang of what we're doing and we want to make sure we get the broadest input possible, we're going to, in the survey, you'll see that all advisory group members can provide feedback on any fundamental objective so that we're ensuring we don't miss any important perspectives in the evaluation. However, similar to the first round, we're just asking that you use your judgment and provide feedback on areas where your expertise is suited. Another new point that we'd like to emphasize in this second round is considering cascading impacts. In the first round, we asked you to look at evaluating objectives separate from one another. But based on really great feedback from the task force this summer, we'd like you to consider cascading impacts in your analysis. So for example, if there's an impact to people through through the portfolio as a whole, or you see that in a specific strategy or action, and it might also have an economic impact, please take that into consideration as you're providing feedback across the objectives so that we're putting together a comprehensive picture of all the impacts. And then lastly, I'll just add that we're asking everyone to provide input on the portfolio as a whole, as Charles outlined before, just one portfolio this time instead of 5. But we'll also have the option for you to provide input on as many or as few individual strategies and even actions that you would like. Supi will walk through what that looks like on the survey itself, but we just wanted to provide the most amount of flexibility, understanding that it is a lot of information to provide that overarching review for us on the portfolio, but wanted to also have that option for you guys to provide specific feedback, because the portfolio as a whole there might be different components that impact objectives differently that you want to note to the side as well. So the last thing that I'll note here is that in the instructions, we mentioned that we'd highlight a few strategies specifically for your review. But we're actually not going to do that. So you can decide which strategies and actions you'd like to focus your review on. So just review them as you see needed, provide that feedback as needed. And Supi, I'm going to pass it over to you so we can put all the pieces together with the survey itself.
Thank you, Lindsay. So what I'm going to do is we have a few slides that overview the materials that you received. So I'm going to walk through those to kind of give you a high level view of those. And then I'm going to open them up and show them and go through them one by one. And I'll pause frequently during that walkthrough. So if anyone has any questions or concerns, we can kind of do it step by step and address them. So the packet that you received had a few things in there. One was a set of instructions. The other was the survey form itself, an Excel file, which portions of that will look very similar to the first round. And then there's a couple of tabs in there that are a little bit different based on what Lindsay and Charles were saying, some modifications we made to get a little bit more granular level of input, and also based on some feedback we received from you and the task force. There's the document containing the description of the draft strategy and action portfolio. So expanding out on what Lindsay said with all the actions are included, and short descriptions of them so that you know what you're evaluating and giving input on. And then a document containing the evaluation criteria. So just like in the first round, you have an opportunity to say if the impact of actions on the fundamental objectives range from very positive, neutral, negative to very negative, and to kind of help that be a bit some consistency across everyone in providing input. We have these criteria that basically my cat has decided to be very affectionate right now. We have some criteria for you to look at, to consider, so that you can kind of have some of the same things in mind as your other folks from the advisory groups have in mind as they're evaluating. So the survey documents, the first thing is the survey instructions. So it does say here, please read through this document before completing the survey. We are aware is the second round, that you're doing this. So for some of you, it may seem pretty familiar, although it has been a little while since we did the first survey. What we try to do in the instructions is put the really key information, as well as the things that are different in this round on right up front, in the first page and a half. And then some of the more detailed things that might look a little bit more similar to what you saw in the first round, deeper in the document. So, particularly that first page and a half, would be really good to review. And then some of the things that are similar to before, it might just be if you're going in an Excel file, if you're having any issues, that might be a place to have a quick peek to see if something there helps resolve the issues that you're having. Similar to the first round, we have some guidance and tips. Number one is reach out if you need help. As far as the survey, don't beat your head against the wall on anything. As Lily said, input is not required for each fundamental objective, particularly because we're opening this up to everyone. If something is just outside of your expertise, don't feel obligated to evaluate it as far as positive, negative, or to give additional comment. Consider the overall outcome when you're evaluating the portfolio as a whole. We'll see when we get into the survey that there's one tab where you kind of give that gut check, temperature check on the portfolio as a whole. So that one, again, we're trying to think about the portfolio as a whole, knowing that there's interactions across them. So getting that big picture view. Uncertainty can be acknowledged and helpful. We are getting, we have a lot more detail now as far as the actions. So I know in the first round it was, it's challenging because the how is, the outcomes are so linked to the how. There's much more detail now with the actions, but there may still be, points at which, you say to yourself, well, I don't know the answer to this because, and, what's very helpful to us is very helpful in the first round and will be helpful again. Go ahead and use your best judgment in providing, an assessment of the outcome, but then use those comment spaces to really articulate, that fill in the blank of because, well, if I knew more about this, or that could be, I'm a little, it could go this way or this way because of, as much detail as you can fill in is really, really valuable. Input is not required for every strategy and action. We wanted to balance to make sure that anything that you wanted to give input on and that you had input to give on, that is really valuable as far as the next steps. So it's, all of the strategies and actions are in there. However, we're cognizant that, that there's a lot of them, and some of them may not be something where you have expertise, or be able to comment on. So it is not required to go in and fill in for each one. But again, that additional detail and feedback, in the first round of analysis, we had a lot of good comments and depth there, and that's really, can't emphasize enough that level of detail and using the surveys as a way to communicate that information is very helpful. So the Excel spreadsheet itself, there's several tabs, one of which will look very familiar to you from the first round, and then two of them will look a little bit different. Actually, two of them will look familiar and two will look a little different. The first is an instructions tab. So this just has some key reminders, as far as the instructions, similar to the instruction sheet, but so you have everything in one file if you want to have a quick place to reference back. There's also a spot in the instructions tab to put in your name and organization, which is appreciated. The second tab is this, evaluating the impacts of to the fundamental objectives. So this is the portfolio as a whole. And this will look quite similar to what you saw in the first round. There's a drop-down menu that I'll show you in a minute where you can evaluate from very negative to very positive, and then there's short answer spots. One thing you will notice is we had more drop-downs in the first survey with those hypothetical portfolios. We were trying to gauge some scale of impact and time scale. If you have anything that you want to comment on those areas, please feel free to use the comment box, but we took out the drop downs because we found that it was a little onerous and that you could give the same feedback if you wanted to in some of the short answer spaces. Just as a reminder, this is not a closed book homework assignment. You are welcome and encouraged. Any resources that you have, that you use, feel free to reference those in giving your feedback here. And I'll show you in a moment. We also have a tab now. This is based on some really great feedback we got where you can identify those resources for us. And again, you do not need to fill in every box. You're welcome to fill in as many as you want, but you don't have to. And there's no issues on the technical end. Don't feel obligated to cut and paste just to keep every box filled. If it's empty, that doesn't break the pulling information. So really, just to emphasize, put every bit of information you have that's useful in a box. Go ahead and put it in there, but don't feel obligated to fill in every one, just to make sure that it's filled in. The second tab, or the next tab in the survey, does look a little bit different, and I'll do a walkthrough in the Excel file in a moment. This enables you to basically select a specific action or strategy to give your feedback on. And so to try and make this a little easier to navigate, because there are quite a few, the first thing you do is select one of these high-level categories. So that was what Lindsay just walked through, for example, clean energy transition. Once you do that, that lets you pick then a strategy as the next level down to select, and then you can go in and pick an action. And again, that's just to make it a little easier to pick out what the strategies and actions are, and so that you can pick and choose which you want to give feedback on. I'll also show you in a moment one aspect of this with having more things in the survey like this is that you may need to navigate a little bit more, zoom, try and make it easier to see and whatnot. And I'll show you that in a moment, because you can kind of zoom in and scroll around and move around to make it easier for you to see. And then the last tab in the survey is the identification of resources. So again, it's optional. The idea here isn't to make a bunch of work to fill in, but we did appreciate the suggestion that people are aware of resources that could be used either that were used in filling out the survey, that were useful in kind of predicting what those outcomes would be. Or down the line when the plan and when this draft action portfolio down the line becomes the real recommendations and things start to be implemented, you may be aware of resources that might be used to track progress, things like that. And so having a place, this is a place where you can put that information so that we're sure that's brought in. The next thing that's included in your packet is the description of the strategy and action portfolio. So this is the what you're evaluating. So it has a short introduction on the portfolio. It has the descriptions, the list of strategies and each action along with the action description. The titles will match of the actions. So when you go in the Excel file, one thing I would maybe suggest is have the list of the strategies and actions either open on your screen next to the Excel file or print it out and have it on the table so you can look and say, all right, as I'm looking through, here's an action I want to give feedback on. You should be able to go in the survey, navigate through to that category, strategy and action, and then go ahead and give in your comments to it. And again, short answer, feedback is welcome. It's very handy for us to have that positive, negative evaluation, but that detail on why you're saying that or any other comments you have is really useful. And then the last thing is this evaluation criteria reference guide. It's been modified. So in the first round, we had asked you to give input if there was anything that was missing in the evaluation criteria or anything else that should be considered. And based on that feedback, we have modified some of the evaluation criteria. So this is also another reference that might be handy to have either, if you're a digital person on, open on your screen along with the Excel or to, print out to have to reference. Nothing was totally turned on its head as far as the evaluation criteria from the first round, but we did have some really good feedback that we used to refine on the outcomes. And again, really important. This is, the survey is designed, the entire point is to get your input. The questions are there to get your input. This is not in any way making decisions on what's included. The positive and negative and whatnot. It really is just a way to make sure that any input that you have is received.
Just making sure that that's my biggest concern, that it has insurance.
Everybody can go on mute. That might be helpful.
I won't go completely out of our name.
All right.
Okay.
So I'm now going to open up to kind of walk through exactly what you're going to be seeing. So
that'd be my main.
Open.
Can I bring the
right from here?
Throw stuff away.
And while I'm doing that, do we have the ability to mute?
In here, like any of this.
Right. If you need.
All right. So when you go in, the first thing that you will have, for some reason it didn't want to open on my screen, but the first thing you'll be able to open is the instructions. Again, this is pretty straightforward, hopefully pretty user-friendly. As I mentioned, we really tried to kind of pop up the information that was most relevant to the second round, and that might be a little different in the second round up to the first couple of pages. But we left in, at the back, there's the detailed information. So again, this is a place that if you're going to fill out the Excel spreadsheet and you're having some issues, this is a place you can also kind of reference back and say, hey, wait, what, is there anything here that can help you with any challenges that you're running into? The evaluation criteria, again, this is going to look very familiar to you from the first round, sorted into fundamental objective. There's a little brief introduction on the evaluation criteria. When you go in, you'll see again, it's sorted by fundamental objective. You'll see tables. Again, the format is identical to what you saw in the first round. Just some, criteria to have in mind. The reason this is included is because, if someone asks you, hey, from a scale of very positive to very negative, the kind of first reaction you may have is, well, what am I supposed to be thinking about in giving that response? And so this is to give some of that guidance on that. And there's one for every objective listed so that you can reference that. And then the next thing I'm going to open up is the Excel file. Let me move this over here. So the Excel file, it is similar format to what you saw in the first round. So you can see at the bottom that this is those tabs that I was walking through earlier. The first one is the instructions. We've highlighted where you can put your name and your organization. Again, the instructions are just to have some key nuggets in the file itself, so that as you're going through, if you run into anything, you want to kind of a quick look back at this you can. And please do make sure to fill in your name and organization in the space provided, so we know where the info came from. The next tab is going to be these impacts to the objectives, so you can click it at the bottom here. And this is the tab that is most similar to what you saw in the first round. So you can see the objectives are listed on the left. There is, for some of you, there will be more than what you saw previously, because as Lindsay mentioned, you have the opportunity to provide input on all of the fundamental objectives. And you can consider, those cascading impacts, like what Lindsay was saying. We heard you loud and clear that, some folks said, all right, well, I know an impact that there might be, to people or to communities, and there's going to be a secondary impact that's going to cause an impact to the economy, and I want to be able to give that feedback. Please do consider that and put that, if you're whatever the final outcome would be. So if there's an impact to the people of Louisiana that would have an impact on economy, consider that when you're evaluating the outcome and the economy objectives. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that you can do in Excel, there's a scroll bar here on the bottom right, so you can move to the left and right. There's similarly one that goes up and down, so you can make sure you get all the way to the end to fill out all the objectives. The file sort of stops when it'll stop scrolling for you when you hit the end. If you want to, you can zoom in. So again, on the bottom right, Excel has the ability to zoom in and out, so you can make the text as big or as small as you want. The piece where that is the most useful potentially is that when you click any of the drop downs, and this is true of this tab and all of them, one of the things that in setting up this survey, just because of the way Excel itself is set up, we have limited ability to control the text size within those drop downs. So if you're looking at this and those outcomes are teeny tiny and very hard to see, you can go ahead and scroll in, and you can make them bigger, and that's true for any of the drop downs. So that zoom, the ability to use that space in the bottom right to make things bigger. Maybe it's just me getting older. It's very nice to be able to zoom in and see the text a little clearer. So for each of these objectives in that first tab that you feel comfortable evaluating based on your expertise, you can go in and pick what you think the outcome would be, using that defined impact, that document that kind of gives you some guidance on what factors to consider. You can then type in short answer, any concerns that you have. So this is sort of if there's negatives that you think, this is the spot to kind of put those in. If there's anything that really jumps out at you as an opportunity or a benefit, there's a tab for that. In providing feedback here on the whole portfolio, please focus on the portfolio as a whole, or if there's anything missing from the portfolio. Because again, in a moment, I'll show you the tab where you can give action specific portfolio, and that will just be very helpful for us in kind of keeping everything sorted. So if you have input on a specific strategy or action, it'll be the third tab. This is more the spot for the whole big picture outcome. There is a spot to, if you look at this and there's just something missing, something jumps out now that you've seen the whole portfolio as a glaring missing item, that's something you can give feedback on. And then of course there's an other comments tab. If you have a comment that just doesn't fit in one of those columns, please feel free to fill it in there. And again, it's very helpful for us, anywhere where you do have expertise and want to give feedback to not only evaluate the outcome, but give the short answer. But if something's outside of your area of expertise, you can just leave it blank. So the second tab, or the third tab, excuse me, the strategy action input, you'll see it's labeled optional, as is the resources. It's very helpful. It's really critical as far as these actions being resolved that we get your input. But we also didn't want people to feel like they had to fill out every input on all of the actions across the portfolio. In this section, what you'll see, the first line, actually, I apologize. I'm getting excited and plowing ahead. I'm going to go back to this one and slow down for a second and ask if anybody has any questions on this tab specifically. Okay, I'll keep going and I'll give a chance for input again at the end as well. But please do stop me at any point if anything is concerning or you have a question. So the third tab is where you can identify specific strategies and actions. We got a lot of feedback. People wanted to be able to give that granular level of detail. So again, just for kind of the mechanics of it and to try and make it easier, the first thing you do is pick one of the categories. Once you do that, you can then that will populate the list of the strategies that are within that category in the second tab that you can select. And then that populates the action tab. So I'll show you on a fresh line here. So for example, if I want to give input on an action that falls underneath a strategy associated with actively managing methane emissions, I would click that category. Now, when I go in here, these will be the strategies that are specific to managing methane emissions. I can click whichever one I'm interested in. And now when I do that, I've got the three actions that fall underneath that strategy. One thing to be aware of is, if I fill this and I said, oh, no, it's not methane. I really wanted to give some input on something in natural and working lands. You can go back and start over from the left and fill that in. The only thing to be aware of, and this is because the only way to make sure that the survey doesn't break for you, you will have to go back and then you'll notice it didn't clear out the strategy or action. You have to go work from left to right, fill out the category, fill out the strategy, and then fill out the action. And the reason we had to do it that way is there are some tricks you can do to make it automatically clear things out, but it makes it a little bit more likely to break depending on what version of Excel you have. So work from left to right, and if you want to change anything, you can also, if you realize, hey, this isn't where I want to be, you can use your delete button, delete it all out and start fresh from the left. Once you've filled in the strategy, the category, the strategy, and the action that you want to fill out, again, if you're zoomed in, you can scroll over so you can see everything. There's a spot where you can say, all right, here's the fundamental objective category that I want to give input on for that action. You don't have to fill this in if you just want to give general feedback on the action. You don't have to, but this is, again, a useful way for us to know what your comments are related to. And you'll notice these are essentially the fundamental objective categories at a little bit higher level. So we don't have all 17. So it's because we felt that would be a little bit difficult filling in to give that level of granularity. So, if my concern on this action is related to economy and workforce, I can select that. You have the opportunity to kind of give whether your outcome for that specific action, is very positive through very negative. Again, this is information that really helps us, understand what, at a high level, what some of these outcomes will be. So you can fill that out. But again, you have spaces here to highlight if you have concerns, if you want, you have suggestions for how that specific action could be modified. And then there's a space for any other comments. This is really all about making sure that there's a place for you to give as much level of detail as you have on what the implications of an action might be, if it has positive or negative impacts across any of those objectives, and to give short answer. So I'll pause now and see if anybody has any questions about this tab. I hope that means it's intuitive and not that y'all are gonna come back later if there's concerns. One thing I will say, and this is true of both of these tabs, is that if you really get gung-ho and start filling a lot of these, you may eventually get to the bottom and notice that there's a highlighted tab that says you've essentially run out of room and you can reach out for a second copy. I believe it's at 400 action comments and something like 100 resources. So it's, you've got to fill in a lot to get there, but we did want to put that flag in there. If you're running on this and filling it out and you get to the bottom at the end of that 400 or so, and you hit that highlighted thing, you can just get a second copy of the survey, and you don't have to fill in the other tabs, but it's just a place for extra room. Because again, we just want to make sure no one's cut off if you have any additional feedback. The last tab in the survey is this resources tab. This tab, I tried to make it pretty simple. So if you've got a website, if you've got a document that's that you want to put the citation for, that you can drop into this first tab. It's a short answer one. Links, anything that hey, this is what I used, or this is something that I would think would be useful when we're tracking this moving forward. Again, you can pick the fundamental objective category if relevant. So there may be some resources that are relevant to many of these. But if there's one that really pops out that this is a way to track economic outcomes or outcomes for natural resources, you can go ahead and fill it in. And then if you have any additional comments, we did want to have that space. So, for example, if you pick a resource, and you think that that's, really valuable moving forward in terms of tracking economic outcomes, you can just type a quick bullet there to say that. So again, really all about getting input on as much areas, actions as is within your expertise. But please don't feel obligated. The one thing we wanted to try and walk the line there with was that, all of your input would be used as much as you give us that you have expertise in is useful. But, do not feel obligated that, this is not a homework assignment where we're giving you to say, give feedback on every single one of these actions and fill in every box. Are there any questions in general on the Excel file? The survey in general? Right, and again, really leave it up to you on, what works well for you, what worked well last time. If it was me kind of thing, what I would do is, start here. Look through the full portfolio of strategies and actions. I'm a paper person, so I'll probably print it out, mark it up, have my comments on it, have those evaluation criteria right in front of me, because we know it is a lot. We're trying to get a lot of input. So have those to reference back and filling that out. And do the same on the strategy and action portfolio. Again, if it was me, I'd definitely be, go through, all right, see the one, this is the one I want to give input on, and go in and click it down from the drop down menu. So I think there's an opportunity, just as far as any questions on anything up until this point. Camille, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi, Stevie. Thank you for this summary. It's really helpful. I appreciate it. I have a question about giving feedback on the overall portfolio on the impacts to objectives tab. Are there any kind of like figures or anything, pictures, to kind of help us get an overall understanding of the portfolio? I'm looking at the draft, and of course, I will plan to read it strategy by strategy, but getting some kind of maybe summary of the overall portfolio to help us with feedback. Is there anything like that available?
Lindsay or Charles, I'm gonna let you.
Yeah, we did create a sort of an executive summary for kind of in-house purposes, but it's nothing much more than just kind of the headline and the strategy title. So I don't think it's super helpful for this purpose. Lindsay, do you? But if you could, I don't know, Camille, can you kind of explain more about what might be useful? Just a way to, because one of the hard parts about this, obviously, is that we had to find, we picked out a way to organize all these different things, and it might not be exactly how you guys would organize it. So that could be part of the issue. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I understand. There's just a lot in the document. I guess I'm thinking like, how can I really form there are a lot of strategies too that I don't have expertise on. So when I'm reading the document as a whole and providing feedback, I guess I can just notate that in that tab. This is my overall feedback, but I don't really have experience or expertise in these fields. That's I guess my concern is providing feedback without expertise in every single strategy sector.
So Camille, as we were writing the portfolio and all the actions, the reason they became so long is because we wanted to put that context in the actions themselves. So I think it will help you as you read throughout that.
Okay.
But we also can put together like a one-pager of just the section titles and what we mean by clean energy transition. What do we mean by industrial decarbonization? We started working on that, but then we got a little excited about actions and just dove full in on that. But as I was presenting it out to you guys today, I think that would be helpful. Do you think that would be helpful for you?
Yes, that would be helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we can absolutely do that. Get a one-pager just of what we mean by the section titles. But as far as it goes in the weeds of actions, I think just reading it through once will help go through that. But if you guys have any questions specifically, we're more than glad to help on that.
And as far as the survey itself and filling that in, I think a way to capture that, particularly if it's something that, like those secondary impacts where your expertise is very solid as far as what an outcome might be, what that primary outcome is, and you have a sense for what that secondary outcome might be, as far as like, so there's an impact for the people, and your sense is that would have an economic outcome, but maybe the economic piece is not where your expertise is as extensive. I think what I would recommend as far as the survey is going ahead and filling out the outcome for that secondary and filling out the economic outcome, but then providing comment in there. I fill this as negative, because this is the primary impact, and I think that would have secondary impacts. And if you want to put the flag in there, I don't have direct information on that. That there's some uncertainty. Again, that putting in that uncertainty is certainly very valuable. But we don't want you to we don't want to exclude that secondary impact, and just because like, you're not an expert on both fully. So that's what I'd say as far as the survey itself.
Okay, and just one more question. So I guess what I was thinking of when I mentioned figures, will there be a point at which we will get to see like a draft of, the outcomes in terms of numbers, like the outline that you guys provided for the policy analysis tool, or that will be much farther down the road? I guess that's what I was expecting to see. And that would have helped me to provide feedback, in terms of the impacts, because I was expecting to see like numbers and figures for the draft.
So we don't have that right now. We're still calibrating the EPS tool with our updated inventory, but we wanted to keep that kind of separate as we did in the first analysis, so that the emission reduction potential isn't influencing how you guys are looking at the other impacts. So we're understanding, yes, the emission reduction potential, but we also want to look at these other impacts aside from the GHG potential, just to isolate those a little bit. But that both will be presented to the task force in October, kind of like we did at the June task force meeting. So they'll have everything at the same time in October. But for you guys as our advisor groups, wanted to keep that separate. That's a great question.
That was a great question. Are there any other questions? Lindsay?
Yeah, you guys are making it easy on us today. I'll go ahead and wrap us up with next steps. I think we didn't get to this slide. One more to the upcoming meetings. So as Charles mentioned earlier, we gave you guys the surveys on Monday. They'll be due back September 15th is when the evaluation surveys will be due. We know it's a lot of information and we're here to help as we can. I also know a lot of people notified us this morning because of hurricane preparation. They couldn't come today. So if anyone's watching on the live stream and wants to contact us with questions, we're happy to help in the meantime. But that deadline's just so we can have everything prepared for the October 4th climate task force meeting to discuss the results of the analysis. When I circulate this meeting link, so the YouTube link, I'll also circulate that June task force meeting link, so you guys can get a sense of how we'll use this information in more detail if you're interested. Sandwiched in between those days, we have the September 27th deadline for public comment. As I mentioned on Monday, I sent you guys 2 big reports aside from the advisory group email. So these are the draft partial final report, which is what we had launched in February, I think. If I got that right, Charles? I think it's February. We've revised that based on comments from the task force in the first public comment period. So we're just putting out a revised draft of that. It's just the context of the plan, background information. We've learned a lot in this process and fleshed out the background a lot better. So wanted to put that out for another round of comment, and the same thing with the draft portfolio, not only for the advisory groups, but also the public. So that's going to close September 27th, and we have those materials on our website. As I mentioned, the next time this group comes back together with all of our other groups is October 26th for the all hands workshop. More immediate in the short term. So we've been preparing for this special meeting of the task force, not specifically involving the advisory groups, but just for your awareness, we were planning the special task force meeting on industry for August 31st, but our team is on the front lines of dealing with the hurricane, and I know a lot of our members are as well, either through the governor's office or outside of that in the community. So we're going to push this meeting back. And also we've gotten a lot of good feedback from the task force, seeing that there's interest in having 2 separate focused discussion meetings on industrial decarbonization. So we're going to break this meeting into two parts so that we can bring in Louisiana perspectives, that we can talk about industry more broadly, and then CCUS more specifically. So I'll keep everyone updated on that in case you're interested to tune in on that specifically. But dates to keep in mind for you guys, September 15th of turning this survey in. I think that's all we have today, unless anyone else has thoughts or questions. We really appreciate you guys hopping on this morning. Hope this was helpful.
All right, everybody stay safe and thanks for being on.
Thank you.